It matters because of a bunch of things going on. You know, we've talked about this before, this sort of showrooming phenomenon where for a while, I mean, the perversity of all of this is where we saw this trend beginning was both in the arrival of the Apple stores that you mentioned, but also in the disappearance of things like Best Buy, right? And the reason why things like Best Buy disappeared was because increasingly consumers were using them as showrooms. They would go in, they'd look at stuff, and then they'd pull out their phone and, buy it at Newegg or Amazon or whatever and just use them as a showroom. So now, things are kind of turning around again. And I actually think this is the trend of the future, is that we'll selectively have stores will selectively have a physical presence, and for the most part just be an electronic phenomenon. Most of your purchasing will happen because, you need the reassurance now and then you go in a store, but for the most part it happens online. So I think it's inevitable. I just think the way Google does this stuff, and I've said it before, is just weirdly deranged, billionaire, tone-deaf, and embarrassing, and this is another example.
You're really sort of seeing like an evil genius there floating on a barge somewhere planning his next entrance into Paramus.
Yeah, snow globes, winter wonderland. I mean, please. This is sort of like they had some kind of strange Google survey they ran for jamming together as many cliches as possible in a single marketing pitch. I don't understand how they do this sort of thing, but the principle of having showrooms, especially in a world that where things like Best Buy are disappearing, actually make a great deal more sense than they did back in the days of the departed gateway stores. So that part I get. I just think Google's messaging is off.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Best Buys. I'm thinking of more like Circuit City or H. Gregg, which moved, or H. Gregg, which moved into the old Circuit City stores and has seen declining sales in 4 of the last 5 quarters. But I wonder, when we've seen this stuff from manufacturers in the past, they seemed always unable to resist the temptation of flooding the channel with stuff that they couldn't sell, and then offering ridiculous financing because no one would buy this stuff, and it inevitably led to really big disasters because these guys weren't really used to or inclined to manage channel inventory.
Right. I mean, and to put it even more bluntly, I mean, there's this incredible temptation when you own distribution to load distribution and treat it as, just your own little play toy that you can use towards the trailing end of a fiscal quarter. And, one of the great things about having some, economic and ownership distance between you as a product manufacturer and you as a supplier was that you could only go so far in terms of forcing people, channel stuffing, we used to call it, to load the channels. You couldn't do it. And now the temptation can become irresistible. So what it says for investors looking forward is you've got a new data point, specifically with respect to Google, but lots of these other companies as well that we'll have to track because they now have this new ability to load a channel with inventory that they never had before, and history tells us that compulsion will eventually become irresistible, so they'll do it.
Well, we didn't used to call still channel stuff, but we still do. In fact, I wonder if this might be a quarter of all quarters when we're going to see a lot of hijinks, because we've really had declining hardware sales from IBM, from I'm trying to think who else we've seen in the quarter. We've seen declining sales, or we've even Oracle, companies that are doing tons of acquisitions that aren't seeing much in terms of rising sales. Cisco is the other one I was trying to think of. I wonder if this is a quarter when people really want to keep an eye out on just how well the sell-through is, just not the sell-in.
No, there's no question. And I mean, this is where, everyone was talking about how the shutdown really was having no impact on the unemployment data or on the employment data, either which way. It had a huge impact on technology, as evidenced by, Cisco's claims that this was one of the primary reasons why they saw a decline in the quarter. But I think you're going to see it also from companies like Google. People forget how dependent this entire sector is, software, enterprise software in particular, is on the federal government marketplace. And I think they've been hurt. And my tell on some of this stuff is pull up Google search, their main page on an iPhone or an Android device, and you'll see the screens increasingly, more so than 6 months ago, populated by ads. They are really trying to wring everything they can out of every channel they have to, juice revenues, push revenues up in the current quarter. And my guess is that's in part because of broader weakness.